Yeah.
Okay, we're ready to go.
All right, all set to go here. All right, welcome to the January 18th, 2024 meeting of Public Safety Committee. I'm Matt Roberts, Chair of the committee. Tonight, we're joined by Assistant District Manager Brendan Berth, and this meeting is called to order at 6:34 this evening. As a reminder, New York State law requires all community board members who are not able to attend in person to have their cameras on. I don't think that applies in this situation. Members of the public who are attending virtually, you can raise any questions or comments through the Q&A feature of Zoom. And members of the public who are here in person, you can raise any questions that you have by raising your hand in person. If there's time following the committee's discussion, we'll field questions from the public. We still need to volunteer to take minutes tonight. Anybody?
I will say it's not Rupal because she's assistant secretary and does
Right.
exec
And I'm
minutes.
doing yesterday's
Yeah.
minutes,
So-
and I did it last week.
It might be Rupal because she's doing minutes like every month.
Yeah. Do
Okay,
we have any volunteers? It's a small committee, unfortunately, so,
Yeah.
I know, and I feel like I've spent a lot of time this week on CB6 stuff,
okay.
so, and really good about taking minutes, like in.
No, I know you, at least.
So when's the last time you took minutes?
I mean, I've only come into 2 meetings on this committee, so
When's the last time you took minutes, period?
I did it 3 weeks ago or 2 months ago for my other committee. I was
I
the first
can't
person
give
to
you
volunteer.
grief on that again.
All right, well, somebody's gotta,
Yeah.
volunteer. It's very easy. We don't, it's.
It doesn't have to be
summary.
long.
Why don't we volunteer someone who's not here?
Well, then we'll still be holding up the meeting. So the sooner somebody offers to take minutes, the sooner we can get ourselves, out of here.
Sorry.
Thanks, Stu. Sorry.
Thank you. Sir.
It changes the meaning of the word volunteer.
You've been volunteering.
Every-
I will now take attendance. Brendan will conduct the roll call.
Committee
I'll do it.
members,
I'll
I
do
will
it.
call your name and you will unmute yourselves. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Stu Desser,
Present.
Eric Goldberg isn't with us tonight. Neither is Gerald Jones. Rupal Kakai,
Present.
Steve O isn't here. Steve Perez,
Present.
Matt Roberts,
Present.
and Sullivan,
Present.
and Haider Zaidi, I also do not see here, but we do have a quorum.
All right. So the agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and is reflected on the screen before you. If there's no objection, we will adopt the agenda. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, please raise your hand. All right. Seeing none, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The minutes from the November 16th meeting were distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there's no objection, we will adopt the minutes as drafted. If anyone has any corrections or changes, please raise your hand. I'm seeing none, the minutes from the November 16th meeting are adopted. They'll soon be available on the CB6 website. All right. The ground rules, nobody may speak until granted the floor. Committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand. I will identify you. You can speak. For everybody, it's very important that only one person speak at a time so members of the public watching at home can understand what is being said by each committee member. And the chat function for committee committee members should not be used for committee business for anybody that's logged on here in the room. So that brings us to the agenda here tonight. We have the commanding officers of the 13th and 17th precincts with us. After many months of extending an invitation, our schedule is finally aligned. So we're happy to hear from them. We'll get updates. Then we'll continue our discussion on the hate crimes legislation. We should have a representative from the district attorney's office joining us. And if time permits, we will get into the illegal cannabis shops discussion, what's being done. I know there's legislation that's being proposed in the city council that may help expedite closures there. And the city council intro 586, which requires the police department to report on police and civilian investigative encounters, among other things, passed the council and is before the mayor facing a veto. So we'll try to get into that if we have time. So without further ado, I want to introduce our commanding officers here. It'll be first time at this committee for both of the commanders. I know Deputy Inspector Orlando was had joined the transportation meeting a few months back, and this will be Captain Clamp's first meeting with CB6. Obviously, I know Captain Clamp very well through my other capacity as the 17th Precinct Council President. So let's start in the 13th precinct. Deputy Inspector Orlando, welcome aboard. If you want to give any remarks or any updates on crime or anything that's concerning in your precinct. You're on mute. Or do we not have volume up?
Volume is on.
Okay. Okay.
I'm seeing. Yeah.
All right. We'll straighten out this audio on. It might be audio on our end.
You hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, now we hear you.
All set.
Well, again, thank you for having me. Just to go over last year's crime overall, 13th precinct was down overall. So we had a nice year for that. A couple of sticking points that we've had was grand larcenies, and that's from shoplifting. Or we've been struggling with our shoplifting. Unfortunately, when we do make shoplifting arrests, there just really isn't much penalty anymore for it. So they come back and they continue doing it because just the money they make off the fencing is just that. But we keep at it, and we're going to try and bring it down as best we can. Also, another sticking point for myself and as well as Captain Clamp is the moped larcenies. As you probably see, there's everywhere you look, you see mopeds driving up and down the streets erratically. And what's been going on is while they're doing that is they're looking for victims, and they steal headphones, they steal chains, they steal cell phones as they're driving by, and they're already gone by the time the person looks up and their property is taken. So that's a struggling point for the both of us, and we've done so much to try and curb that by doing illegal moped operations. I mean, my precinct right now, it's tough to walk around. There's so many mopeds that we confiscated. So that's one of the tools that we use to try and combat this.
All right. It sounds good. So question, anybody have any questions for DI Orlando?
Well, sure, but they're probably for both.
All right, so you know what, let's let, all right, so thank you, Inspector. So I'll hold it right there. I'm gonna bring in Captain Clamp for introductory remarks, and then we can field some questions from the committee. So Captain Clamp, welcome to CB6 Public Safety.
Hi, everyone. So first and foremost, I just want to wish everyone a very happy new year. It's my first time at this meeting, so thank you for the invitation. My name is Captain Maggie Clamp. I'm the 17th Precinct Commanding Officer. I'll get right into the 17th Precinct Public Safety Overview for 2023, along with some helpful hints on best practices for public safety. And that will really assist in our crime prevention. Just so that we're aware that we also, I just want to tell you how many officers that we have newly assigned. So I am very, very thrilled about that. Their addition assisted in the success of our overall crime reduction in 2023 by 3%. As I continue to mention at every community council meeting that I have been to in the 7 months having been assigned, that the 17 precinct police officers have continued to address emerging quality of life conditions and addressing crime conditions with regard to their response time is impeccable, and which, considering really the traffic that we have in the city here. We created a bike enforcement team during late spring of 23. We rolled it out in July. We assigned a sergeant coupled with 3 police officers who patrol primarily on bicycles. And in 2024, I plan on expanding that unit primarily because of its success. We have seen a significant footprint in their efforts and how they effectively maneuver and address quality of life conditions. We have overall continue our focus on, much like what the inspector had stated earlier, on moped-related issues, really involving grand larcenies, street robberies, and what we really do ask our stakeholders is to assist us in being able to give us the information. We can't be everywhere always. We ask that if you see something, please call us, tell us, and if you could pass some helpful hints that I'm about to mention to your friends and family and people who cannot make it to the meeting. Just have them be vigilant of their surroundings, especially while on the street corner. Clothing and their body position at crosswalks poses a significant safety concern, more so during the winter months when it's darker out for motorists, as well as it gives it an opportunity for criminals to take advantage of the positioning, especially if they're on a moped, to remove either jewelry, headphones, or an electronic device. And also, if you are a member of a gym, please utilize the keypad to enter your code and try to cover the keypad so we could prevent any kind of larcenies from gyms. Also, IRS scams and donation scams. We ask that people refrain from giving out their phone to allow people to access to help Venmo or use one of these cash apps in order to transfer and donate to different organizations. And that's pretty much it for me. Thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Captain. So just a couple of general follow-ups. So you mentioned, I think, and you mentioned it as far as the mopeds. So the primary objects, so we're seeing a lot of street robberies off of mopeds, right? So what are the primary things? Is it electronics, jewelry? Is there anything that the residents and visitors should keep out of sight, or, you know, go to extra length to make sure that they're less accessible to a moped that's coming up on the sidewalk?
It's
Well,
actually,
much like-
yeah, you could go.
No, go ahead, Inspector. I'm sorry.
It's actually the crime of opportunity. So we've seen headphones with the mostly Apple products with where it's an easy grab. They just, not the small ones that are in your ear, but the max ones that they just pull off your top of your head. Cell phones, electronic devices, and chains. But for the most part, it's pretty much they drive by, they see an easy mark, someone not paying attention to their property, their surroundings, someone with their head buried in their phone. They'll just ride up behind you, snatch your Beats or whatever headphones that you have, and then ride off. Or they'll see you not paying attention, they'll grab your cell phone and take off. It's pretty much whatever they see that they could grab, they'll go and grab.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. All right, let's open up to questions from the committee for both of our commanding officers. Stu, do you have a question?
Well, actually, they did a pretty good job answering my first one, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. We'll do this out of sequence. You've told us some ways, but in what ways do members of our community, including individuals and businesses, leave themselves vulnerable to crime unnecessarily, in addition to what you've just described?
And another issue that we're having is store owners using keypads or those little lock boxes to pass the key to the employees. What people are doing is, they're breaking these lock boxes during the night to gain entry. So, if you could have them utilize other ways of passing along entry, keys to their employees other than a lockbox, that would be great. And as well as, we really need to drive home the point of treat your cell phone like your wallet. You wouldn't hand your wallet to someone. Don't hand your cell phone to someone for asking for a donation.
Makes sense. Ann?
So I have two questions. One is a follow-up, which I didn't have before, but do you have suggestions for, like, I understand, some guy's been at the job since midnight and then somebody's gonna be there at 7 o'clock. A lockbox seems like a really obvious solution. Do you have another suggestion for that?
There's some companies that use electronic access where they use a key card and it's
Ah.
programmed towards each employee in order to gain access. So this way, when an employee does leave, they just turn off their key card. They don't have to rekey the door.
Great. I'm just thinking because I also sometimes go to our business affairs committee and I want to pass along that suggestion. So, my other question, which is, I think more of maybe a 17th precinct question is, I live on 46th and 2nd, and I see that you guys are not even bothering taking down the barricades between protests these days. And, it seems like it's all, pretty much under control, but I just wondered if you wanted to comment on what's going on with that.
So what we have seen are a bunch of, several actually, unscheduled protests where protesters come by and obviously they exercise their right to protest. However, we do in fact like to have the barriers in place, so it gives them an area in which they could peacefully protest. And there's also an area in which pedestrians can freely walk up and down the street without having their day-to-day routine affected. So we use it more so as a safety issue for everyone involved.
No, not a criticism, just a question.
Yes, no, that's fine. That's fine. That's what we're here for.
All right, anything else from the committee?
So you've talked about crime being conducted from micromobility devices, but we also have a perception that they're dangerous, that there's too many of them, they're ridden in a haphazard manner. Is there any kind of data that tells us that there's more crashes or collisions as a consequence of having so many more electric motorized devices on the street?
Well, I don't have the actual numbers to say that, but we could look into that. We get back to you on the actual numbers, but for that, but I could tell you that the people that are riding these mopeds, they don't have helmets on, and when they do get into an accident, they are usually not going to make it. That was what I've seen.
What about collisions with other people?
Like I said, we'll have to look into that data for mopeds versus persons, but we do have it. And we could look into that for you if you're looking for the number base. We could do that.
Well, I think enough to know if it's a significant issue or it's just a perception.
It is a significant issue, so much that the city council is trying to pass legislation to have each of these mopeds and electric bikes to have a license. So I believe that that's one way of helping the issue. And we'll see if that actually passes the city council and how it will affect us.
Yeah, I have two more questions.
Matt,
I do have a question.
Do you know if transportation?
Hi, I'm John Falbetta. I'm the resident manager of the St. James on East 54th Street. I'm here on behalf of former Commissioner Bratton. Who was almost clipped the other day by a bike. So the question is, and I have a number of questions, but are they permitted to be on the street without any sort of formal permit or license right now? Or is there something in the works to try to control this situation? That's part of my question. And the fact that they go both ways from time to time, and I understand that deaths have doubled in the past year. So that's one part of my question for the avenues. The side streets, are really, we have to do something about the sidewalk. I realize that the advocacy for bicycles is huge, and I'm one of them. So on 54th Street as well as 55th Street, you have the curb as the bike lane, and you move the car out with a little cushion of 3 feet. And so that lends itself for the passenger, the driver getting out of the car, or anyone behind him, in a precarious situation. Same with the passenger on that car now, which is right in the line of the one lane traffic. And of course, if you park on the other side, it would be the same situation for the driver. So there's a lot of damage here. I'm looking at this situation, and I've done it with the commissioner, and I would tell you, now, you visualize with the street that I have, right? You have the bike lane, then the car. So the only thing you have going, the main, lane for the car is just that. Now, what's happened is sanitation can't pick up their garbage. And we have to have a very courteous, regular driver. So if he's there picking up garbage and the car's back up behind him, he will actually go around the corner again and again and again. But that won't happen. As far as the inspector for sanitation, he looked the other day, he goes, I'm not coming down there with a plow. So these are a lot of problems. But you know what, looking at the situation, I think that the best place for that, going down the side street from the avenue from First to Second or something or whatever, would be and I know there's gonna be some controversy on this one, but I think it's a real good win. I believe going that, by the way, we have that new overpass on 54th Street going over to the drive, which is beautiful. And I think that's why they did it on my block. They wanted it to be seamless to go over to that path rather than curve it. So if you put the bike lane down the center of the street,
On 54th Street.
of any block that has one, 55th Street's the same thing. You have the bike lane, then you have a little cushion, and then you have the cars. And then you have cars on the other side. So, it's only one lane for any truck, ambulance, and you can't, so you're dead. I have a building next to me that still gets oil. He gets that oil delivery. He's in the middle there. No one's going anywhere. Sanitation, no one's going anywhere. Ambulance, they may not even be able to get down the block if the oil truck is there or a mover.
All right.
It's ridiculous. I really feel that both cars should be at curbside. You put the the bike lane down the center, and guess what? So if you're making a left coming down the block and the bike's in front of you, you know what? 90% of the time, 90% they're flying down the block anyway, so we could get them to go 15 miles an hour as they should be going down that block. It's a good thing. And if the bike decides to move out of the way, he has a cushion to move out and let the bike pass. And I've seen the safety increases dramatically. So that's my take on it. I think that the commissioner's take on it, but he is the former commissioner, so I don't know how much he has going on. But please take that into consideration. And thank you, Inspector Clamp, for meeting with me and going over these issues and bringing it to the front table. So thank you for that. And please take this into consideration.
All right, so we'll follow up. Here, if you could just leave your contact information with us, we'll all
Does that not
communicate.
seem like a transportation committee?
Yeah,
too?
the second piece of that is I would ask Brendan to just either liaise with DOT and Colleen or the transportation committee. I know the street design was recently, within the past
It's really bad.
few years was redesigned. But I think that area, I think needs to be relooked at now that
Yeah,
once the Esplanade, traffic, once we get into the warmer months, it's a little iced over right now, but, as we get into the warmer months, we need to review that, for any traffic changes, any pattern changes that may warrant some street design changes. But again, that's transportation. So appreciate your comments.
Yeah, let me leave my stuff out, because I do have a number of points.
Sure. Sure. Let's write it Sure. So we'll follow up with you individually. So you said you had a couple of good questions.
Right, retail theft has been an issue, in the news now. It's reported that it's probably not increasing, astronomically, but it is an issue. Is there a role, or what is the role of the police department as opposed to what the responsibilities of retail shop owners in order to try to combat retail theft?
Well, retail theft is what's driving my crime right now. So what we tell the store owners and the larger companies like Target and TJ Maxx is first thing we don't want their employees to engage with the people where they feel they'll get hurt. But they also need to report it to us in a very timely manner, so this way that we could try and find these people that are doing this. And what I have set up here is I do have a dedicated retail theft team that pretty much liaisons with all the loss prevention people along 5th and 6th Avenue, where they know each other. And if they see the people that usually come in to commit these crimes, my officers will get a phone call to come to that store. So this way the loss prevention people and the security people in those stores don't have to do the engaging where they may get hurt.
Do you station anti-crime officers in any of these stores? I know you sometimes have uniformed officers.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Roy. Thank you.
Well, the anti-crime officers are now all in uniform. So the only difference that they have now is their cars are usually unmarked, but they are in full uniform right now.
Okay, and I will ask one more question. Is the captain still with us, or?
I believe so.
I'm here.
Okay, I'm sorry, did you have an answer to that? Anything different with retail
So-
theft?
What we currently do is that we've had multiple meetings, typically once a month, in terms of best practices on there, and much like what the inspector had stated earlier, where we exchange phone numbers. We also encourage them not to engage with these individuals who are performing these thefts, because it typically elevates to a crime where it's extremely concerning for the employees. Also with that, our patrol officers conduct multiple directed patrols, which means that they exit their vehicles, they go into the store, they check in with the employees to see if everything is going well. And in the event they have our telephone numbers, they obviously are encouraged to call 911 immediately, but then phone us directly on our cell phones.
And as a consequence of this, have you made more arrests? Have you increased apprehensions by?
So I'll give you an example. And most recently this week alone, we saw a number of thefts in a particular gym. So we had our crime prevention officer go out, have a conversation with their employees, and to tell them exactly what they should be telling 911 over the phone, right? Don't alert this person as to seeing them and observing the thefts. And then as a result, that person called 911 and our cell phone. We immediately responded, and we were able to close out more than 4 complaints with this apprehension. So our plan is in fact working.
Just to add that, my retail theft team arrest for grand larceny of shoplifting is up 350% so far this year.
Okay, thanks. And just one more question then. Obviously, from the other angle, community relations is a concern everywhere. Do you know how many officers within your precincts are the subject of CCRB complaints or have been the subject of litigation, and in some cases have been responsible for substantial settlements? Do you know those numbers?
Yes, we know exactly every officer who has any complaints. We have a report that we could fall to, and every time that they do have a new one, we get a notification that one of our officers has a new complaint against them. And we try and mentor them and we look into it and do the best we can to mitigate that.
And when there are settlements, when there are payouts from the city, do you know how much you're paid?
The actual dollar amounts as an
Yeah.
aggregate, no, but we do know the outcomes of each of these lawsuits on a per officer basis, but I don't have the aggregate number.
Thank you.
All right, I just want to I'll get to you in a second, Brendan. So just want to circle back on the shoplifting, because next month our committee is going to be focusing exclusively on that issue. And so just wanted to know from yourself and Captain Clamp, is there anything else that the community can do or that you'd like to see more of from the businesses? Because we'll be meeting we'll hopefully be joined by the DA's office, the business community, many community members. What would you like to see happen to try to get the shoplifting under control?
Well, first thing, I wish there would be, once we do make these arrests, I would hope that there's some kind of teeth to the arrest on the DA side. But other than that, as far as the pass along to the stores, I see the videos of what they do when the people come in to steal. They come in with shopping bags and they just walk up to the display, pour it all in, and then they walk out. It's not like the old days where they'll just walk down the aisle and try and sneak something into their jacket. It's complete brazenness of just walking in, filling up a shopping bag, and walking right out. It's like it's actually just watching these videos, you're just in awe on how they just are so brazen about it. But as far as that, and that's why we need the DA on our side when they see these videos and they see this over and over again, to actually do something about that when we do make arrests.
And in general, would you say that you're satisfied with their prosecution efforts, or is there a lot of pushback when those cases are when those arrests are sent over and brought to them?
I was looking at a report today of all my arrests for the past month, and I can tell you many of them were declined prosecutions based on prosecutorial discretion. So what that means is that the DA's office just didn't want to have the time or effort to prosecute these cases. And I can tell you it's a very large number of these arrests are declined prosecution for prosecutorial discretion.
Do you ask the DA's office why they DP'd a particular arrest?
We get, when it's a larger crime such as like a robbery or an assault on somebody with a weapon, we'll get into the weeds on that. But with like a petty larceny or a grand larceny, there's just so many of them where they just decline prosecution for prosecutorial discretion, where when they do decline it, they just tell us it's their discretion and that's their decision.
Yeah, I know from a 17th precinct perspective over the years, I mean, we've had limited success, but a little bit more success when the precincts package the number of arrests and basically pull the track record on the worst of the worst individuals, send it over to the crime strategies unit. And I know at least anecdotally, a couple of individuals did some jail time. So has that been a strategy on your end as well?
Absolutely. Whenever it is someone that has 100 arrests or a violent history, we do reach out to the crime strategy unit in the DA's office for that. But for the majority of the people that are doing this, they don't have a violent history. It's just multiple petty larcenies for shoplifting. So without that violence component, there's really nothing for them to hang something on.
All right, sounds good. Brendan, you have a question?
Yeah, so I know Captain Clamp was talking about some tips in terms of what we could do to prevent ourselves from being victims of, I think it was moped larcenies, if I remember correctly. But apologies if I'm getting it wrong. If there are any tips and if there's any literature pertaining to those tips, the office would definitely appreciate having some of those. We'd be happy to run that information in our e-blasts and e-newsletters.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. I'll have my crime prevention officer reach out.
Great, thank you.
Perfect.
Great suggestion, Brad.
All right, so we'll try to get some information out on all of that. So I think we covered a lot of ground there. So appreciate your time, Captain Clamp and Deputy Inspector Orlando. I'll try to be back in a few months or so. And if you're interested in the shoplifting meeting, you can feel free to pass along to your officers, to anybody that wants to join. It'll be the same Thursday next month at this particular time. They can watch it on Zoom or join us here in person on 43rd Street. So appreciate the time and look forward to continued conversations.
Thank you.
Sounds- Have a good night, everyone.
Take care.
Okay, thank you.
All right, very good. So we had our precinct.
So Matt, given that it took several months for them to get scheduled, maybe we should start scheduling now and assume they'll make it in May.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the scheduling had to do with the protests. I know. But that's why I said a few months, sometime in the spring. Generally, it's been my goal to have them come about once a quarter. It
Seems
ends
about
up being
right.
more like 2 to 3 times a year, but obviously we have community council meetings every month to get more granular. So I mean, so we only have one member of the public, but if anybody from the public were to come with more granular issues, I would just direct them to the community council meetings because we have a lengthy agenda and 2 precincts to cover here. So with that, I'm going to turn to our hate crimes discussion, as I believe is next up on the agenda. So we had a preliminary discussion last month, and I believe we're joined by Assistant District Attorney Hannah Yu, who's the chief of the hate crimes unit, from what I understand. And we also have Keenan Kurt from Senator Hoylman Siegel's office, who has joined us in the past for other issues. So welcome to you both. I know the committee prepared some questions over email, which unfortunately the public does not have visibility to, which we sent over to
The DA's office.
to the DA's office for prep. So I don't know, do you, so let's start. So I guess, so we set up, on our side, we set up a subcommittee where we had 3 individuals who took the issue and were drafting a resolution and there were several committee questions. So I don't know. So first off.
So Matt, did you see the question that I sent today? That was like a rewording of something I had sent
No, I
earlier?
pulled your earlier questions along with Stu's questions, and then obviously I didn't think that question was something that they needed to prep for. You should be able to ask that tonight.
Okay.
So we'll start with Assistant District Attorney Hannah Yu. So we understand the district attorney's point of view on this. I know Eric Straza from Community Partnership Unit was with us last month. And we had some more specific questions regarding the legal aspects of the proposed legislation and just really wanted to get a real world view of what the legislation would do. So I don't know if you have any prepared remarks or anything you want, any opening statements.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. I'm honored to be joining all of you. Happy New Year to everyone. I guess what I will start by doing is giving you a brief overview of the current hate crime statute, what it looks like, how it is currently effective, and why we worked with Senator Hoylman Siegel and Assemblymember Grace Lee to draft and propose this bill. So I think the bill can only be considered in the context of the current statute. So the current statute in New York, and I'm only an expert in New York hate crimes laws, it reads as follows. You can charge someone with a hate crime if they commit a specified offense, and there is a finite list of specified offenses. Currently, there are 66 crimes that you could commit as a hate crime, and they run the gamut. They include murder, they include certain sex crimes, they include assaults in varying degrees, petit larceny, and many crimes. So 66 is quite a big number. And it criminalizes hate crimes when you commit one of those 66 crimes and you either select your victim because of their protected identity, the race, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, etc., or you commit the act, whatever the act may be, because of, in whole or in substantial part, because of a belief about a person's gender identity, race, religion, etc. So there are 2 ways we can charge hate crimes. Either you select the person or you commit the act. And in New York, the standard is that the motive has to be at least in substantial part because of some view about the person's identity. Every state has a little bit of a different hate crimes law. The federal hate crime statute is also different from the New York law, but that is where New York stands right now. What we've noticed over the years is that there are certain crimes that we see again and again happening in the hate crimes context that we cannot charge as hate crimes simply because they're not included in this list of crimes. And some of them are just obvious, glaring loopholes in the crime. So for example, you can assault someone individually as a hate crime. Classic example, you walk up to someone, you say something, let's say homophobic, you target them because of their sexual orientation and you assault them. You can charge that as assault in the 3rd degree as a hate crime today. If a number of people, 2 or more people, gang up on a member of the LGBTQ community, same fact pattern, they say something homophobic, they target this person because of their sexual orientation, and they collectively, as a group, beat up that person. Currently, we cannot charge gang assault in any degree as a hate crime because gang assault is simply not included in the list of crimes that you can charge as a hate crime. Another kind of very obvious example, assault in the third degree, your classic, punch of a person that causes physical injury can be charged as a hate crime, but criminal obstruction of breathing cannot. Makes really no sense. There are also subsections and other sections of certain sex crimes. Some sex crimes are included in the hate crime statute and others are not. Some subsections of different murder and manslaughter statutes are included and others are not. One glaring omission that we found is that graffiti cannot be charged as a hate crime. We have been charging vandalism cases as hate crimes under a different subsection. So and that's called criminal mischief in different degrees, very depending on the level of damage done to certain property. But let's say you tag with graffiti a synagogue and you leave damage on a window or a door. We do charge those incidents as hate crimes because of the damage element that exists under the criminal mischief statute. But if, let's say, someone used, marker that wipes off easily with cleaning solution and it leaves no damage, that would constitute the offense of graffiti, which we currently cannot charge as a hate crime. Another set of facts that we come across is the weaponization of police reports. Falsely reporting an incident happens quite often by one race against another, calling and reporting that your neighbor or someone that you see committed a crime when that's not true. That may very well be motivated by some sort of animus or some sort of belief about that other person's identity, and should be chargeable as a hate crime, but currently as it stands, it's not. Falsely reporting an incident, which is a crime, is not included in the list of crimes in our hate crime statute. So after seeing these issues arise and having conversations with the NYPD's hate crimes task force, other DA's offices, we recognized that the statute needed an upgrade. So our office partnered with Senator Brad Hoylman-Sigal, Assemblywoman Grace Lee, and proposed this bill. It's called the Hate Crimes Modernization Act, to fill in those gaps. There really shouldn't be crimes that you can commit, even if it was motivated by hatred, that you can get away with and not face the consequences and the accountability that the hate crimes laws are there for. And so we came up with a list of 31 additional charges, additional crimes that we believe come up enough, are sensical enough. And again, I haven't given you all the examples, but there are some human trafficking crimes that we think are omitted. possession of weapon charges, and others that we think will make this a more complete statute, make it a more effective statute, and allow more crime to be charged as hate crimes, of course, when the evidence is there. So that's sort of an overview of the existing statute and what the aim of the proposed act is. And I'm looking at some of the questions that you provided in advance. Do I have a sense of what the NYPD thinks? So Deputy Inspector Gary Marcus and I work very closely together. He has really both before October 7th and after October 7th demonstrated true leadership in this area. He stood with us when we had a press conference announcing this act. We know that these are common sense fixes to the existing hate crime statute. It's really not, in my humble opinion, it's not a controversial amendment to the existing statute. And so I know for a fact that the NYPD is on board, and DI Marcus agrees that this is just a common sense fix to some of the glaring omissions in the current statute. Will adding a hate crime element to prosecution increase the charge or sentencing parameters? So this is a really great question. Every state does it a little bit differently. In some states, charging something as a hate crime merely enhances the sentence. In other states, it changes the entire charge. In New York, what it does is it bumps up the level of charge one level. So for example, if you punch someone, that you'd be facing a charge of assault in the 3rd degree, which is a misdemeanor. It's a Class A misdemeanor. If you commit assault in the 3rd degree as a hate crime, that bumps that up to an E-level felony. E-level felonies get bumped up to Ds. Ds get bumped up to a C. So what we see a lot is assaults with weapons, which would be a Class D felony. Assault in the 2nd degree is a Class D felony. If you charge that as a hate crime, that would bump it up one notch to a Class C violent felony. And so on and so forth. It caps at Class B felonies. So B felonies do not become A felonies. A felonies are our most serious felonies. Murder in the 2nd degree is an A felony. That does not go up any higher. B felonies don't go up any higher. But it changes the classification of the crime, which is important. And I think it's important because it recognizes the severity of the crime, both to the individual and to the community. How do you compare before and after if it includes new charges? I think the existing statute does a decent job at capturing hate crimes today. But as I mentioned, there are just some glaring omissions. And we find, most of the time we'll find a way. So for example, if there's a gang assault and let's say people, the gang or the group of people also used dangerous instruments during the assault, they would be charged with assault in the 2nd degree as a hate crime. They may not be charged with attempted or completed gang assault. And so there are ways that we can work around the omissions, but the Modernization Act is essential in allowing us to capture all the hateful activity that we are seeing and increase accountability for those. The last question I think is a good one and worth dwelling on a little bit. It's the following. Would Danny, the Manhattan DA's office, be amenable to an amendment that would define a hate crime as one where the victim was selected not merely because of the victim's race, ancestry, gender, etc., but specifically on the basis of the perpetrator's animus towards the person's race, ancestry, gender, etc. So instead of making it merely because of someone's race, requiring that the perpetrator have an animus. My opinion on that is that animus is often difficult to prove. Animus is a type of motive evidence, and in most, if not in most of our crimes, motive is not something we have to prove. We never have to prove why someone committed a crime. In murder trials, one thing you might hear a prosecutor say is motive is not an element of the crime. You may still be wondering why someone was murdered, but that the why is not something we have to prove. In hate crimes, the why is something we have to prove. We have to prove why the victim was selected, and that's often very difficult. A lot of times, there may not be overt evidence of animus. So I'll give you a couple examples. I mean, you may infer that the defendant hates a certain race or color or religion, but sometimes it may be unclear. If someone goes on a pattern robbery and only selects, I'm going to give a random example, only selects Mexican women or Chinese women or Jewish women, and steals from them and commits a series of pickpocketing incidents from a select group of people. Do we have evidence of animus? Maybe, maybe not. We certainly have a clear pattern of selection. And under the current hate crimes laws, that intentional selection is enough. I'll give you another example. We had a defendant commit 7 assaults, and actually this is relevant for Community Board 6 because I believe the assaults happened within the confines of Community Board 6. But a defendant went on an assaulting spree and targeted 7 different Asian women and assaulted them in a 3-hour window within about a 20 block area. Didn't say a word to them. There's no evidence of, overt hatred. He doesn't say any slurs. He didn't say anything anti-Asian. He didn't say anything as he walked up to these women unprovoked and began assaulting them one at a time. They were not all in the same area. He went and targeted 7 different Asian women. That intentional selection of a very distinct type of victim shows that he selected a specific kind of person based on their appearance or their physical, their appearance of race. And the assault may get us that he had animus, but we may not have overt evidence of animus. So all this to say is that I think animus is a requirement that sets the bar very, very high. We often in our hate crime cases, we don't have defendants who write 90-page manifestos about how they hate a certain race. That is very rare. That is, we see that in the news quite often, and that's really good evidence of the hate crime, but we don't often have that. And so I think raising the bar to require animus would prevent us from prosecuting certain incidents that we know are motivated by animus, but may not have that clear cut, absolute evidence.
Yeah, I'm sorry to jump in, but I was not expecting to be on this long. My phone is at 2%, so I just want to make sure to be able to address you all. And thank you for inviting me on. I apologize, ADAU. But on behalf of Senator Hoylman Siegel, I just want to thank you again for inviting us here and say how proud we are to work with the ADA, or I'm sorry, with the DA and the ADA and Assemblymember Lee on this important legislation. And I think, this is going to help us not only name what things are happening and to create the proper penalties for what happens, but we're also going to have better data collection, better public understanding of what hate crimes are. And we were very excited and proud to see that the governor in her executive budget that was just released earlier this week has included most of our Hate Crime Modernization Act in her executive budget, along with a $10 million increase to the Securing Communities Against Hate Crimes program. So this is very much on the table for the legislature in this session, and we're hopeful that we're able to either do it as part of the budget or do it as a standalone bill. And then just quickly, if I could plug two unrelated things, since mopeds and shoplifting came up in the prior discussion. We are also partnering with the DA's office on a bill that one of the captains said it best, that people are doing this shoplifting because they're getting so much money by fencing it. And what we've seen, according to the DA's office, is folks will go onto websites like Amazon and eBay and sell their goods that they stole. And it looks like any other product you would buy on Amazon. You can't tell it's stolen. And these platforms are making millions of dollars off of these illegal sales. So we have a bill that's going to make it a crime to knowingly facilitate and profit from the sale of stolen goods. And hopefully, if we can shut off the funnel of money, we can really decrease the incentive for folks to commit this shoplifting. And on mopeds, we're working with your state senator, Senator Krueger, and we've jointly introduced a bill that would require the licensing of all gas-powered mopeds at the point of sale. These are vehicles that are already required under state law to be licensed and registered, and that's simply not happening. So we're going to make sure, we're going to put the onus on the dealers to make sure that those are registered. So people will at least be able to identify when someone is either driving erratically or someone's committing a crime on a moped, or and for any other reason that you might need to adjust. And at that, I'll try to stay on as long as my phone holds up. So I apologize for jumping in there.
Nice. All right, thanks, Keenan. I think we have one question for you.
Can I ask a quick question? Well, in case we lose him, one question that committee did have while we were drafting the resolution was, why were all of these charges left out of the original legislation? Couldn't find any information about that. And what was the rationale back then? Obviously, it seems obvious a lot of these charges should be included, but many of the charges were not included in the original hate crimes bill. Why?
Right, and why these now?
Yeah.
That's a really great question. I looked into the legislative history of the current statute, and it's just void of any dialogue on that. My best guess is that as many things go, there was a compromise, and for some reason, the legislators, in their wisdom, decided not to make every hate crime eligible, and to come up with a finite list. That's the best explanation I have. I wish I knew. Why these and not others? I really don't know. I think they came up with what they anticipated would be crimes committed as hate crimes, but no one has a crystal ball, and I think they missed some crimes that we see again and again happening in the hate crimes context. And over the years, they have actually added offenses to the list. They for example, well, then they've changed the law ever so slightly and amended it a few times. They added, I believe, crimes of terrorism to the list one year, and they also added gender identity and expression to the list of protected characteristics. As we became a more inclusive society that recognized that some people may change their gender identity over the years. So it's changed over time, but yeah, we think that these 31 should have been included in the beginning, and I really don't know why not.
One more quick thing that we had originally. One other question, when you talk about data collection and data reporting, one of the concerns we have is, so now we're adding new charges. Suddenly we're counting things that were not counted as hate crimes before. How do we so suddenly it's going to say 300% increase in hate crimes because those things weren't, even if they were being committed, they weren't hate crimes before, but now they're counted as hate crimes. So how do we inform everybody about the actual data so that we're not kind of comparing apples and oranges?
Well, these crimes could only be charged as hate crimes if they are hate crimes. So to say that there would be suddenly a 300% increase in hate crimes merely because we're adding 31 new offenses to the list, it really isn't based in reality. In order to charge anything as a hate crime, there has to be, as I mentioned, that element of motive. We need if someone walks up to someone in an unprovoked way, punches them and walks away, and we have no other evidence of why they did that, nothing from their social media, no statements made to the police later, nothing. Regardless of what that person's identity is, they could be, you know, an Asian woman, they could be a Hispanic, no matter what their identity is, we can't charge that as a hate crime. And so because we are bound by the elements of the hate crimes laws, which requires proof of motive, we're not gonna see a huge increase in hate crimes charged merely because of the addition of these crimes. And as I mentioned before, if we can, these crimes would be charged as, most of these crimes would be charged as hate crimes anyway, but under a different subsection or statute. So for example, if you grab someone's neck and you squeeze, right now, criminal obstruction of breathing is not a crime you can charge as a hate crime, but there's other offenses that we could charge under that same activity. So if you grab someone's neck and squeeze, you would still be charged with a misdemeanor hate crime called aggravated harassment in the second degree, which criminalizes any physical contact based on someone's race. So that covers, you know, knocking off someone's yarmulke or pulling on someone's hijab or going and throwing eggs at a certain race, you know, not causing any physical injury. So you're not going to see an increase in hate crimes. What this does is it makes the hate crime charges much more accurate. And it's a common sense fix to many of the loopholes. I think in the falsely reporting context, we may see a rise in hate crimes there, because I think that is one particular crime that is, you know, the reporting system is weaponized by certain people to target other people. We can't be there. I'll give you a very concrete example. If someone, have you guys heard of swatting incidents?
Yeah.
So certain synagogues across the country have experienced what the FBI and other law enforcement officials call swatting. It's called swatting because someone from somewhere else, it could be a different country, will call 911 or 311 and report that there's a bomb or some other threat at a synagogue or a house of worship, flooding that synagogue with the SWAT team. I think that's why it's called swatting. That may be hate-based. It may be anti-Semitic, it may be something else. That's a false report of an incident that cannot right now be charged as a hate crime, when it clearly is. So in some contexts, yes, we will see an increase in reported hate crimes charge. In other contexts, those are being charged as hate crimes anyway, but maybe a lesser charge or a different charge. We may not be capturing all of the criminal activity as hate crimes, and we do the best we can to acknowledge what they are if they are hate crimes. But we're not going to see a 300% increase in reported hate. We're just not. I hope
Makes
that
sense.
answers your question.
Anne, you have another question?
I have kind of two questions, actually. One is a follow-up, because I think there actually is, just speaking as somebody who looks at statistics carefully, it's like saying that, you know, the batting average of pitchers before and after you got rid of the designated hitter rule is the same, and it's just not. You know, so I think that if you say, and I know New York One, announces the hate crimes all the time. So I think forgive me, but I think you're being a little disingenuous. And I'm sure Steve that was a random number to say, 300% increase. But what our concern is that we are not comparing what happened in 2020, say, and what we will see in 2026, those numbers are not the same, right?
The numbers are increasing anyway. We've seen a dramatic increase in hate.
we won't have, we won't have an actually accurate, and I'm not saying that's a reason not to do it, but we do need to acknowledge and in some way present the data so that ProPublica doesn't say like, oh, this data is garbage because it doesn't break out what used to be hate crimes
Right.
and now.
Oh, yeah, I totally understand that. One thing about data, though, is data can be skewed to reflect the views of whoever wants to share the data. I'll say this, citywide, NYPD's complaint report data on hate crimes is dramatically increasing year by year. We've seen since 2019 through 2023, we've seen an increase in hate crimes year after year. 2023, we've seen a dramatic increase in anti-Semitic and anti-Muslim hate crimes. The data shows an increase in hate crimes anyway. And of course, if we expand the list of hate crime charges that are eligible to be charged as hate crimes, of course, we're going to see an increase. My point merely is that we're not going to see a drastic increase simply because we're adding new charges to the hate crime statute. We've seen a dramatic increase anyway. We're becoming a much more polarized society. There is hatred, and hatred comes in all forms. And I'll just say, you know, if we find one defendant hating on, let's say, gay people, chances are that person may turn the next day and commit an anti-Semitic or anti-Black or anti-anything hate crime. We see that hate translates in a lot of ways, and becoming a more divided country with a lot of conflict in the world, there's a lot more hate today than there was before. I'm merely saying that the expansion of this list is not going to contribute all that much to the already increasing numbers. We're seeing the numbers increase anyway. What I do think this does, though, is it allows hateful conduct to be charged as what it is.
Yeah,
And
I just think we need to be transparent about, you know, this is how they would have been counted 10 years ago. This is how they are now. So that's all. I think that's our concern.
Yep.
The other question I had, and I'm the person who asked the first question about upping the charge versus having kind of separating them. And I sent another version of that today because it was not phrased super coherently. My concern is that if it's all one charge rather than sort of a charge and an overlay that raises it to the level of a hate crime, is that if you have and I don't know the answer to this, if you have a higher bar to prove that higher charge, it makes it more likely that somebody, you know, they might have been accused of a, you know, 4th degree felony or a 3rd degree misdemeanor, but they're not gonna be found guilty of the next higher level with the higher burden of proof. And so by charging them with hate crime, they're more likely to walk.
oh, that's a good question.
That's kind of
So we've had 7 hate crime trials in the last year. And on 5 of the 7, we had convictions on the underlying charge, but acquittals on the hate crime charge.
So a jury can choose one, but not both.
Yes. And that it's, you know, these are difficult questions for the jury. Like they don't have, again, we don't have 90-page manifestos that talk about how much someone hates another race, right? So we have to show the evidence, and sometimes the evidence, you know, jurors and in the jurors' minds, they think, well, this person seems like they're racist against everyone, and I don't know if they were racist against this person, and that racism is what motivated them to stab this person. It sounds like they got into an argument, they said some slurs, and they assaulted them. So they are challenging cases. They are very challenging cases. but they are it's meaningful to the victim and the community
Sure.
to charge them as hate crimes. We have had successes, but they are difficult cases to prove as hate crimes. But you just don't walk because you get an acquittal on the hate crime.
And if it's 7 women in Chinatown, like that must be that much harder to prove, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the defense argument is the only reason they assaulted this person is they happen to be in Chinatown, and Chinatown has a higher population of Asians. And so we've heard it all. We've heard a lot of different defenses or justifications for why someone might have acted in a certain way. But the bottom line is, no, they don't get to walk simply because the hate crime element is difficult to prove at trial.
So you said you had seven trials. How many times in the last year have you charged a hate crime?
In 2023, we initiated about 112 hate crime cases, meaning misdemeanors and felonies, mostly felonies. But we started 112 cases as hate crimes. What that shows, and that also shows that our office has been charging more hate crimes every year. And that's, I think, a combination of two things. There are more hate crimes happening, and there's more awareness of what is a hate crime, and therefore people are more encouraged to report. We've been working with the NYPD so that first responders to hate crime incidents know what questions to ask. Oftentimes, if you're part of an immigrant community, if you don't speak English, you may not think to tell the police, oh, by the way, this person called me a slur. That's not really what you're thinking about when you're holding your arm and you're bleeding out of, you're bleeding from your injury. So we're trying to be better at investigating incidents to make sure that we're zoning in on the right questions. But 112, by the way, encompasses more than 112 incidents. Sometimes we'll charge 7 incidents of hate under a single indictment, and we count that as one statistic in our book. Every agency counts stats a little bit differently, and so 6 reported complaints in NYPD's book might equate to 1 single initiated prosecution for us if we indict all incidents in a single indictment.
So you've charged 112 times. You've had 2 convictions at trial. Are the rest plea bargain? Are they acquittals? What's going on?
So either they're still pending, because if a case began in 2023, the chances that the case is resolved depends on when it was started. Cases can take anywhere from a few months to a few years sometimes, depending on motion practice and other delays. Maybe the defendant is found unfit to proceed to trial for a year or 2, and that may cause the case to delay. But we've had a number of hate crime convictions. If appropriate, we may require that the defendant plead to something called a repleader, where they plead up front to a hate crime, have to do a number of conditions. Maybe it's mental health court, maybe it's substance abuse programming, maybe it's some stint in probation, maybe it's anti-bias education. There's a whole host of alternatives to incarceration options that we have, and they may earn either a non-hate crime conviction or a non-criminal disposition. So it depends on the facts of the case. We look, we take a holistic approach. We've got a 18-year-old with no record who commits a nonviolent act of hate. We'll consider all those things. If you've got someone who's a violent predicate felon who was on parole or probation at the time that they committed another violent felony, and it happens to be a hate crime, that, those cases may wind up with some sort of incarceratory sentence. And it may be a lengthy prison. It really depends on the facts. We have cases that range from misdemeanor level physical contact cases, like I mentioned, the harassment cases where you're pulling on someone's religious garment or doing something that may not lead to injury. And we have hate crimes as murders. So Every case is different. We look at the facts, we look at the criminal history of the defendant, we look at the harm brought to the community, and we take all those things into consideration.
So of course, one concern is always overcharging. You overcharge to get a better plea. You charge somebody that did not express animus or indicate animus, but there's some basis for saying, well, their selection method was based on the person's gender or race or something. How do you respond to that concern?
We are very careful about charging hate crimes because we're bound by the law that requires proof of motive. There are plenty of cases that come through our office that we take a look at, that we investigate, and we say, this was a gratuitous remark. This person would have done this anyway. The slur was a gratuitous throwaway remark. And we will not charge those cases as hate crimes. So it really depends on the evidence. When it comes to overcharging, I think the concern is, I think people who don't know the statute may have that concern that, aren't we going to be overcharging or charging so many people with hate crimes? But the fact is, the law is very, the bar is pretty high to even charge something as a hate crime. You need that motive evidence, and we screen these cases very, very carefully. That's what I can say, is that the concern, I think, is not really born out of an understanding of the hate crime statute, which is a difficult statute and it has requirements. And so as prosecutors, we're bound by the elements of the hate crimes laws. And so we wouldn't really be able to overcharge because the law is what it is.
Have you noticed that maybe in the recent past, that I know you mentioned that it's really difficult to prove and get convictions for a hate crime, as you said, out of 7, you've only managed to get 2. Have you noticed that at least that trend is changing in some way? Like, are you finding it that the community or just, the community or the city itself, the people are maybe more open to looking at something as a possible hate crime? Or do you feel like that trend kind of has stayed the same, or do you not have the data for that?
I don't know if I have any data other than my experience talking to a lot of people in the community. I've given a lot of hate crimes presentations. We've gone out to CUNY schools. We've talked to public safety and religious leaders. We've talked to a number of people in the community. And I think my sense is that there's a heightened awareness of what constitutes a hate crime. I think, people in different pockets of communities understand that hate crimes did rise dramatically during the pandemic. That we are seeing, I mean, it's all over the news all the time. We are seeing a lot more incidents of hate, particularly after October 7th. So I think all of that discourse, it does raise an awareness of what hate crimes are. And I think what that does is it does open people's minds to considering evidence of hate. Back in the day, before sex crimes laws were updated, and before the Me Too movement, we saw a lot of skepticism about sex crimes. A single, sex crime victim making an accusation of rape or other sexual assault was met with a lot of skepticism. And over the years, as we talked about the experiences of sex crime victims, as the Me Too movement happened and more people came forward, that raised a level of awareness that a lot of women were experiencing this, men and women were experiencing this. And I think what that does is it does open people's minds to being fair to the victim and not demanding more than simply what happened to you. Could this be a hate crime?
Good questions, great material, very interesting stuff. Appreciate you giving us some context around the existing laws and the proposed legislation. I know the committee had a lot of questions. I think we've covered pretty much
Yeah.
everybody's questions here, so I
Hannah,
appreciate that.
thank you so much. This was great. Super interesting, really helpful.
Happy to be here and chat hate crimes. If you have any other questions, I think one of you have my email, so I'd be happy to connect again. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I have your email, and also, Keenan said that his phone died, but is happy to follow up with any further questions.
Sounds great. Appreciate the time and the presentation and talk again soon. Sure.
Take care, everyone.
Take care. All right, so that brings us back to the committee here. So I know we have a draft reso. Is there, based on everything we've
Which I
heard
was gonna
tonight?
say, something tells me Brendan is pulling out.
Yeah, which lo and behold is on the screen here for anybody at home. And for us in the room as well. So is there anything that we heard tonight that would want us to, would make us make any changes that are giving us any thoughts about any changes in the text?
You know, the only thing is this, like this whereas, like the third whereas, it's missing a little nuance. It's not inaccurate, but I think it would be so long to like actually explain it that it's not worth changing.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say,
Like if people have questions, we can answer.
yeah, I mean, I think we got a lot of information here. I don't want to get too deep into
No, I
it
agree.
in the course of a resolution. It's really to state the, you know, the important points.
Yeah.
So I mean, I know with anything legal, it's very easy to get deeper into everything and, when you bring attorneys in, there's gonna be a lot of nuances that come to the surface. So, I mean, we can basically refer everybody back to the video of tonight's presentation if they wanna learn
Right.
more about it. But I think what you have here, what we, is generally pretty good. I'm sure we can make a couple of grammatical tweaks, but I didn't see anything or hear anything substantive that,
Hell, I'm not even sure I saw any grammatical tweaks.
yeah, I mean.
Which for me, like.
I know, it says a lot.
Yeah, I mean, based on the substance of what we heard, I don't think that, just at a high level, I'm thinking of what we wrote. And nothing is like, oh my gosh, we missed some,
Yeah.
No,
nothing is like
Totally.
Yeah.
off in
Yeah.
terms of how we kind
Right.
of presented the information.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because a reso is like you build the argument and then you say what you want, and I think the argument didn't change
Mm-hmm.
and, the ask doesn't change, so, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah,
all right,
so
so,
it took a lot of work to get to the same place, I guess, but
yeah, I mean,
with confidence.
yeah, I mean, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah, me
It took
too.
an extra, 45 minutes, but we leave with a lot more
But look, I
knowledge.
mean,
and
we know
insight.
Yeah.
what, we know that we weren't missing something.
Exactly.
Going into
Yeah.
it, we didn't know if we were missing something, so.
Yeah.
Well, and I just feel better having a better understanding of it.
And she confirmed a lot of things, what I was kind of thinking was possibly going on, so it just makes it feel more comfortable knowing that, okay, that is accurate, like I have confirmation on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there were just a couple of things where Stu left some, do we want to include Senator Hoyleman's name in this section or not?
I mean,
if he was still a rep for CB6, I would, but since he is not, I feel like it is less important.
yeah, I mean, I don't think, it's fine if you have it. I think it's also fine if you take it out.
Totally.
It's not pertinent. I mean, I do agree if it was a representative from this district, it might be a relevant point, but it's,
We can just remove that.
yeah, I mean,
Part
it's
of it.
less about who wrote the bill and more about what the bill actually says and will do. If passed.
And then there was a question about the amount, I think, up at the whereas, what's
Oh,
the
the numbers,
increase?
yeah.
In this sentence came directly from the DA's office, public announcement regarding this. They also didn't specify like a X%. I mean, it's also like a little. Like, we don't necessarily wanna have that be the, oh, well, that's not the right number, you know, that's not what we want people
Yeah.
thinking about, like. Everybody's saying there's an increase, the data shows there's an increase.
Right.
It's enough to say that there's been and we're not overblowing it by saying, oh, it's only been like 3%.
Yeah.
I mean, I looked at some of the numbers, it's, if you looked at the NY State Office hate crimes 2015 to 2022,
Right.
which we don't have 2023 data, that's the other problem with reporting
Well,
numbers.
it is
We don't have the
big
most
gap
recent,
there.
but if you look at that, those two numbers, it's like 110% increase. So
Yeah, so we can just
I
say
don't
something
know
like
that
a
we wanna like
significant,
put a number on there. 'cause then we
yeah, you can
be
say something like a
criticized.
significant rise or
That's-
something like.
When it
Why we
comes
left it a
to,
little bit like.
when it comes to this kind of reporting, I would try to stay away from numbers. Simply because there's different things that happen. So
Right.
NYPD will put out a hate crime number, then, you know, in the course of the prosecution effort, some of those might get declined to prosecute. Some of them, the
Right,
hate crime charges may fall off. So you gotta be careful with what sets of numbers you look at. Cause I mean, I see them on the CompStat things that NYPD puts out every week, but that doesn't actually mean that the person is, it just means that they were charged. And initially, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the charges are gonna stick throughout.
so do we wanna stick with this kind of vague, significant?
Yeah, that's why
I'm fine with
Yeah,
that.
I
Yeah.
think it just makes the
I
point.
think it,
that
yeah,
It's a problem, you know, that's the reason why we need a
I mean, I
resolution.
think people are gonna respond to that. you
Yeah.
know, Like, yeah.
yeah,
I mean, I'm always suspicious because I don't believe what I read on Nextdoor, you know what I mean? But I think there's more substance.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Can
Yes,
you go up to the second whereas I have a very trivial addition? But rather only, second line, but rather only in connection with.
Okay.
Speaking of trivial, just gonna change hate
Yeah.
crime
Yeah, I
to
don't know why
lowercase
that's
because that's
capitalized.
not a proper noun situation. Go back to.
Yeah, I was a little bit hesitant about this, like, do we need to list them all?
yeah, that's,
Like,
Yeah, I mean,
they're already there.
yeah, I mean, it's fine if we wanna take them out. But yeah, I don't.
does it make the resolution stronger if we leave them in though? Does it have
The
an
thing is,
impact
it's
on
like,
that?
the point of putting that in is we're not alone in saying
Right.
that, you know, there's a lot of support for this. It's not
Mhm.
controversial, there's a whole range of groups here, from the DA's office to like, you know, community groups that are behind this, so it's kind of like.
Well,
It is a long list, but the other thing is like, once you start taking people out, then it's like, well, why am I taking out that group and not the others?
Or we need to put Senator Hoylman Siegel back in here.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanna mention all the sponsors, like this would be.
I think this would
Well,
be a
because
place
we
to
have
mention.
Grace Lee.
Yeah,
here, So
so
we
then I
can't
think-
have her.
Yeah, I
without-
think in this case, we should add,
Put his name.
Put his name
there,
in.
Yeah,
because taking
As
it
the
away, like
sponsor.
I said, might weaken the support, while keeping it on there does show like you said, a wide range of support.
Yeah, so I mean, if you wanna leave them listed, that's fine. If you wanna just say, you know, a wide range of community and special interest groups, or however you wanna word it, that's fine too. Either way is appropriate.
Brendan just add in Hoylman at the top, cause he's like a sponsor, so.
So at the top of
Like-
the whereas,
right.
After district
No, I
attorney,
think, yeah,
before Assemblymember
Yeah.
Grace Lee,
Yeah.
just add Senator.
is that your vote to keeping it all in?
I would say.
Yeah, I would say
Just
All
because.
right, that's two. I have actually no opinion.
Yeah, I mean, how many pages is the rest?
Well, that's what I was
It's
like,
pretty
well,
short.
Yeah, that's just 2 pages and then
And it's not
includes-
gonna change it from 2 pages to 1.
Yeah.
So.
We're already over a page. It's not gonna make it more than two. It's less work if we
If it
have
was gonna
to.
change it from 2 to 1, I might say yes, but.
All right. Good, any other adjustments
Be
here?
resolved, the legislature, that's the bill, governor.
Yeah, John, feel free to chime in if you have any.
The last two resolves, just for people who didn't see this before,
Yeah.
it's just to capture, we recognize that hate, if we really want to reduce hate crimes in the community, simply prosecuting more hate crimes is not going to do that. There needs to be a lot of other programs that address the root causes of hate crimes. The goal is to reduce hate crimes, so it just acknowledges that, and then the last one is just that data question that we had about being mindful about how you report the information so that, people are not walking away with misinformation.
And that's a very important point. It's one thing to pass the bill and then you have more prosecutorial leverage. But is that really gonna solve the problem? Probably not. So you
That's
really
true, I
need
think that goes.
education.
Well, on that last further resolved, we can strike that should this bill become law, we encourage, because we encourage it whether or not that becomes law.
Mhm.
Well, except there are no newly eligible
But
offenses.
it only matters if the law is passed.
Yeah.
Right,
No, because we still have a hate crime.
No, but
the data,
there were, we're
They're not
saying
counting.
is,
this is just reporting, but the last one is just about the reporting of data. Which without,
And
if the law doesn't pass, then the baseline is the baseline, there's no change in data.
Okay, I mean, I think we want to encourage data collection anyway.
No, but we're saying here it's
I-
disaggregation. There's
I-
nothing to disaggregate if the law is
I
not passed.
understand, but I'm
Yeah.
just saying, if we encourage data collection, then we are also encouraging disaggregation based on the underlying offense, but that's. I will surrender to this.
Okay.
So any changes or no?
the only thing, I
No.
mean, if anything, would be adding something about data transparency, but
They're already reporting everything. so-
exactly.
so
Yeah,
There's nothing to add to that.
okay. All right, anybody want to make a motion?
I'll move this in favor of this resolution.
All set.
All right.
Okay, when I call your name, please say whether you are in favor, oppose, abstain, or abstain for cause. Stu Desser,
In favor,
Rupal Kakad,
In favor.
Steve Perez,
In favor.
Matt Roberts,
In favor?
and Sullivan.
In favor.
With all 5 committee members present voting in favor, this resolution passes.
Very good.
You like that.
So I just wanna say, if anybody here's a theater person, prayer for the French Republic, very relevant to this.
Interesting.
Yes.
All right. All right, so thanks everybody for the discussion there. So I know we have 2 more items on the agenda and it's 8:05, so I think what we'll do is we're gonna just briefly touch on the cannabis shops. I don't really have a big presentation or any real material. I know John has some thoughts on that as well. I can tell you, obviously as we heard at full board, Councilmember Powers' office is still working through the nuisance abatement law legislation. I checked in with Patrick today and he's basically saying that there's still a lot of support for it. And they're working on some things behind the scenes, so there should be more to come. So from that perspective, I don't think we need to go too deep into it tonight. I think we'll have other opportunities over the next month or two. But as far as it goes right now, it's still an enforcement issue. So it's really a matter of flagging, them working with the sheriff's office. It's multiple agencies. The Office of Cannabis Management is involved, the DA's office also involved. So there's a lot of parties that have to come to the table there. But that's basically how it's being managed in the interim. I know it's very frustrating for everybody that's the other committee is also looking at the legal applications that are coming through, and obviously those people who are acting in good faith to open legitimate businesses, and now all of this illegal stuff continues for the time being. So and of course, there's not only the revenue losses that are being felt, but also the safety elements too. We don't know the quality of what they're selling, who knows what they're selling.
Right.
So I mean, there's,
Education.
yeah, there's just there's a lot of challenges with that. So I do anticipate us looking at that legislation once it gets reintroduced, the new session of the council. But as of right now, it's still a work in progress behind the scenes, in the city council. So, with that, does anybody have any thoughts, given the time? John, did you have anything you want to add?
I really couldn't add, we could have an hour's discussion on this.
Yeah.
There's nothing I could add to that and summarized it well. Our resident, our board passed was quite good in terms of reporting. Problem is they're not doing what we asked them to do.
Yeah.
But, you know, as I said, it's gone for an hour, so it's
Yeah. Okay. All right. So anything else on that, Brendan?
Yeah, just from a service request standpoint, so, a couple of ways that the office has found we could at least get some enforcement action. One is through actually the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection, which, like, cannabis technically isn't directly in their purview, but selling unlicensed cigarettes and e-cigarettes, which is happening apparently in a lot of these places,
Yeah.
is in their purview. So we've been getting some enforcement actions from DCWP. It can be a bit slow, but, that is one way that we've gotten some enforcement actions, and in one or two cases, even getting places to be shut down.
Is that a 311 call? What's the best way for, just a citizen? Is it a 311?
I don't know if 311 has something for that, but certainly if anyone reaches out to the CD6 office, we'll tell DCWP.
I'm just trying not to put it on your desk.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but I don't know whether, that's a good question. I'll need to find out for you on that one. Yeah, that's a good question. The other way, speaking of NYPD, is, I have found in a few cases that PD has gotten involved on nuisance abatement grounds. But it does involve court actions as well, so, like, NYPD needs to step in, but also the courts also, like, judges need to also, step in as well in these cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to be clear that although the sheriff's department is the lead agency there, it's also fine to go to the local precincts with these issues. NYPD can certainly take the reports and funnel it through the system as well. So they may be a little more accessible than getting a hold of the sheriff and the Office of Cannabis Management and all of that, so.
We have not had any headway from an enforcement standpoint with the Office of Cannabis Management.
No.
Well, I think they're overwhelmed.
Yeah, I think
No.
they're probably overwhelmed. But we have had some luck, as I said, with Department of Consumer and Worker Protection.
Yeah.
Even though cannabis isn't even in their purview, which is interesting.
Yeah, so it's definitely, if anybody in the public is watching this and has concerns, I would say first point of action would be notify NYPD, your local precinct. Second, notify the community board office. Third, notify your city council member with any issues. And from there, everything will come together in time. It won't be quick, it won't be easy. And there's a lot of evidence that needs to be collected, but just be patient. I know everybody's working as hard as they can, given the limitations. All right, anything else on this? I mean, we can put this back on the agenda when there's some legislation or another point of action that we can take as a committee. So I think I'll move with that. I'm going to move the discussion really quick to the city council intro 586, which the rep from the mayor's office brought up again last week at full board. It was also brought up to me by some other members of the board who have concerns about the legislation that was passed. Believe from our district, it was pretty split. I believe Keith Powers is noticeably missing from that list
Yeah,
of
I
supporters.
noticed that too.
So I mean, everybody's divided on this. I can tell you, you know, even long before this, like 2-3 years ago, my internal view, was that the police department already has way too much paperwork on their plate, dotting the i's and crossing the t's. Every time I'm asking them to look into community issues, I want them out of the precinct and from behind their desks. I'm told, well, you know, they're doing paperwork. The other, so this was long before this was even, this is only gonna exacerbate that, from my view. And I will say that the other risk they have to look at here is if this, so obviously it's passed by the council, it's facing a mayoral veto. If the council were to override a veto, the other thing you have to look at is the fiscal implications here, because this is, you know, if the police are out on responding to an emergency, they're gonna be, and their shift ends, then
Right, over
they're
time.
still, yeah, so
Right.
now they're gonna come back and now have to do another hour or two of paperwork, or maybe it's electronic paperwork.
So,
But still, they're gonna be on the clock, and we're gonna be paying them overtime to accomplish that. So I'm not sure if there's, you know, there may be a middle ground here, but, you know, I think right now the consensus leans, from what I'm hearing at least, is slightly against, this piece of legislation, while there still are arguments, that can be made for it.
and my concern with that is, and there's like a lot of people who are supporting it that I respect.
Mhm.
But, I just heard such, we talked about this, that like such conflicting things about, you know, if a kid gets lost at a street fair and a cop asks 3 people, hey, did you see this little boy? That whether that needs to be written up. Now, as far as I can read, like this basically is saying like only if there's criminal activity. So, but I would really like to see, before I would support this, because I agree with you about the paperwork. I would really like to see an assessment of, okay, how much more paperwork is this gonna be? Like, how many more? Because what this is about is, where it's coming from is people feeling like stop and frisk is bad. And this is how to, if not stop that, at least to make it clear who is being stopped and frisked.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure this is the right way to do that. It's-
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, there's already a lot of documentation that goes on. I mean, the dispatcher pretty much has to know where every officer is at all times. So I mean, there's already, and that's just one element of it, that once there's a, you know, once they, you know, complete a directed patrol, let's say they're checking in on a drugstore that has frequent shoplifting.
Right,
When they come out
right,
of
and that's
there,
an
they still have to,
investigative,
yeah, they still have to
right?
document all of
Right.
that.
and
what
would they
time
have to
were
do
they there.
another one then?
Yeah, so now you're asking for, you know, more, you know, did they talk to the store manager at that drugstore? You know, did they, you know, what, you know, it's just reports on top of reports here, so my recommendation here is there's probably a way to streamline the reporting, within the department. I'm not privy to all the details of what gets filled out on these, reports, but I would think that, you know, without hiring a high-priced consultant, they could probably find a way to accommodate any concerns here without creating more reports and more.
And again, I don't think it's gonna solve the problem that is they're trying to fix.
But that was my thought, was that, okay, because the only objection that the NYPD could come up with was, it's a lot more bureaucracy for us to do this. Whereas on the other side, I mean, this is a major civil rights issue.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so there were a lot of very good arguments made on the side of the civil rights. And the whole the NYPD can say is, well, we just can't fill out all the paperwork. I mean, I feel like there is a solution somewhere
Yeah,
that can get them to do the reporting, because we do need transparency and we do need to get that information to the public. And there's just so many examples of how that really transformed the way that policing
Yeah.
happens in the city,
Exactly.
when all of that data suddenly became available.
Well,
So-
maybe it's not the
Exactly.
reporting,
It's-
maybe it's the behavior.
And we're not asking the police to change their, well,
Okay.
what the interesting thing is, it does this change their
Yes,
behavior, because
exactly.
now if they have to
No,
report, the interesting part was between level 2, level 3,
Yeah.
right? So they don't have to report level 2. They should be reporting level 3, but it's a very gray line between level 2, level
who's
3.
deciding?
So the police officer gets to decide, was that a level 3 or a level 2? And the level 2s, they don't have to report. So now people are saying, well, they're actually undercounting the number of level 3 interventions in the community. We don't know about it because they don't have to report it. So this bill is asking them, no, you need to report level 3, level 2, level like, so that we have a clear sense of
This
what.
was
these-
adding level 1 and level 2 and
No.
3 were already
No,
required.
only level 3 and 4.
Well, there were different,
Have
there
to
were
be
some
reported.
negotiations that occurred before the council passed this, where I think they made some compromises. From what, speaker was put out in a statement. So I mean, there's been some movement on it, but I still think, you know, it
So,
needs to
So
be.
let me just bring a different perspective,
Yeah, that's
in,
fair.
because you know that's where I come from.
Of course. That's fine.
First of all, back in 1999, I'm pretty sure, was the Spitzer report. When he was Attorney General, about stop and frisks, about the Terry stops. And at that time, I believe it was called the UF 250 form
Mhm.
that police had to fill in. And that form, so first of all, of course, it was discovered that often the officers were making unconstitutional stops. But what they found is even from that form, some of the information that the officers filled in demonstrated that the stop that they made was unconstitutional. So the form, the paperwork is actually a source of very important reporting information. Secondly, the levels that the tiers that are described here are actually a reflection of the New York State Court of Appeals decision to DeBoer, I've never known how it's pronounced, which is the state equivalent to Terry, that defines when something is a C, you know, when you would actually see someone as a Fourth Amendment matter. And the fact that officers would be compelled to fill in the paperwork suggests that they would also be compelled to actually think about and understand better what these different tiers are. So I do appreciate that paperwork is always unappreciated by the people who have to fill it in.
And the people who require it.
And many people don't type well, although they do very well with their thumbs on a cell phone. And so I mean, I think if there's a way to streamline the process, that's fine. But I certainly would not want to undermine the gist of this legislation.
Yeah, understood. I mean, I think there's probably a way to accomplish a lot of this with the existing infrastructure. And instead of requiring additional reports, that there's probably something that can be, you know, tweaked in the existing reporting.
Well, Matt, you were not proposing like an opposition to the resolution of opposition, were you?
I know some members of the board would like to see that. I don't think we're gonna have any resolution on this just yet. Simply because it's, you know, 20 after 8 and, you know, we already have a full agenda for next month and our March agenda is filling up quickly. So I mean, yes, I mean, I think we'll see where it lands, over the next month. I may, you know, try to squeeze this into, depending on our shoplifting conversation. I don't want that to be a 2-hour meeting, like it was 2 years ago. We could have a couple hundred people, that might want to listen in on that. That was, the last time we did it, was exclusively on Zoom. I think we had like at least 150, 200 people, that were on the meeting. So that's why I want to do a follow-up, because nothing's changed and I know there's a lot of interest in it. So, so that'll be the focus of next month's meeting. So we'll see where this shakes out over the next couple of months. you know, I do think the mayor is going to stand, behind his veto threat and actually veto it. And then we'll have to see, you know, does the council try to override it? So unfortunately, you know, we don't have, it was brought to my attention. I mean, it was basically a done deal, last December. And then, you know, now that the mayor is looking to veto this, some of the board members approached me and said, hey, can we look at this? So if time permits over, you know, if it's still relevant in the next month or so, we'll try to get a speaker or a couple of speakers from the different sides that can give us a little bit more insight as to what this really means. And I think we'll go from there. All right. But just wanted to keep everybody in the loop as to what's going on. And, you know, we may be asked to take it up again, depending on what happens. All right. So that brings us to the chair's report. I think I've covered everything over the course of the meeting, so nothing else to report, which takes us to old or new business. Does anybody have any items of old or new business? Nothing, Stu?
I'm so sorry. But I'm doing the minutes and we don't need to add anything.
And that's why you sign up for the minutes in advance when you know
So
it's
that's
gonna be a slow night.
All right, so appreciate everybody's time. I think we covered a lot tonight, some interesting content. Hopefully everybody learned some things. And, you know, we'll pick up the thing next month with shoplifting. I think we're good with that reso, because we still don't know when the full board is gonna be, if it's gonna be the 7th or the
Yeah.
14th. They're looking for spaces, basically was saying last night, which you heard, but, you know, they're not finding any spaces for the 7th, so it may end up being the 14th still, so they'll let us know. But I think we're set with the reso. If there's no objection, we'll adjourn the meeting at 8:24.